In teenage, the same boy and the same girl. The girl is being praised and whistled at by every boy who wants her. She's being looked at with admiration and showered with praises of how beautiful she is, how she has a beautiful figure, the beauty of her hair. Everybody, including the aunties and uncles, is showering her with praises. The boy, on the other hand, is looking out to all the girls that he's now admiring, and what he gets is rejection. He is being scorned, he is being insulted. Hello, our episode of today leads us to what's the greatest need of a man? What is the greatest need of the men around you? We say these secrets we are learning are not just for husbands, but they are also for our sons, raising the men around us, our brothers, to become better and to reach out to their greatest potential. What is a man's greatest need? Some women whom I have asked this question have answered and told me a man needs love. Others have said a man needs food. Others have said a man's greatest need is sex. But the Bible tells us that the wives must respect their husbands, which must be one of the things that men need most from us. And so I want to put it out to us today that a man's greatest need is not love. It is not love. Women need to be loved. A man's greatest need from the women that he loves, the woman that he loves, especially his wife, is that she respects him. The book of Proverbs 31 and verse 11 tells us that her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good and not harm all the days of her life. So this thing that a man needs most from you, that will bring him good all your life, is not love, it is not food, it is not sex, it is respect. A man interprets respect according to the dictionary meaning. Respect means to hold in high regard. Respect means to praise. Respect means to appreciate, to acknowledge. Respect means to deeply admire. And so men understand respect to be admiration, praises, affirmation, and acknowledgement of their masculine strengths from the women that they love, the women that they admire. I would want us to ask ourselves a simple question. Why would a man leave a very beautiful woman only to run to a woman whom, in our view, has no appeal at all? Maybe the episode today will help us demystify this. Why a man would leave his mansion in the leafy suburbs of the country and go to the slums where he spends the night. Because men love to be admired. Men love to be praised. And where does this need come from? I want us to picture two scenarios. One is a girl. This girl is being brought up by a very loving family. Love is all around her. She's praised continuously about how beautiful she is, what a good girl she is. This girl runs and comes back home crying, and the mother lovingly comforts her, holds her, assures her that whoever has made you cry, I will deal with them. So she is taught that it is okay to express yourself. On the other hand, we have this boy who is dressed nicely by the mother, and the mother tells this boy, you go and come looking dirty. You go and make yourself dirty and you will see what I will do to you. This boy is constantly reminded about how naughty he is, how disobedient he is. He goes and comes home crying. He's met with accusations of being a weakling. Why are you crying like a girl? Instead of getting comfort, he is beaten some more. Why are you being beaten up by a boy smaller than you? He is bashed on, and what he's being told is you cannot express yourself. it is a sign of weakness to express yourself. In teenage, the same boy and the same girl. The girl is being praised and whistled at by every boy who wants her. She's being looked at with admiration and showered with praises of how beautiful she is, how she has a beautiful figure, the beauty of her hair. Everybody, including the aunties and uncles, is showering her with praises. The boy, on the other hand, is looking out to all the girls that he's now admiring, and what he gets is rejection. He is being scorned. He is being insulted. Those two people cannot grow up the same. The girl on one hand grows up a very emotionally strong person, learning to express herself, learning to hold herself in high regard, learning to have a confidence and self-esteem. What about the boy on the other hand? He moves around like an emotional cripple with an empty cup of emotions that was never filled. No one praised him. No one acknowledged him. No one told him what a good person he was. And worst of all, no one allowed him to express himself, because expression of his feelings, according to his upbringing, was a sign of weakness. It was not a sign of masculinity. So this young man, as he's growing up, he's looking for somebody to fill this emotional cup. And he meets a girl who he thinks is the most beautiful person in his life, in his world. And he thinks, this is the person who sees this good in me and will call it out. And so most of the men that we have are empty. And this makes being fed of that emotional cup a need for every man. Men love to be praised and to be admired because it is an emotional need that helps bring out the better side of them that was suppressed for so long. And you know, it doesn't matter where these praises come from. If a man is not praised by the women that are significant in his life, his mother, his wife, then those praises mean nothing to him. In fact, a man who is not praised, a man who is not appreciated, acknowledged, affirmed for his masculine nature, a man who is not pointed out the goodness about him, becomes a bitter man. He becomes a lonely creature, and he longs for it. In the book of Genesis 3 verse 16, the woman was told that you will bear children in pain. Your desire for this man will be for this man, and he will rule over you. So a man was wired to come and rule. And so he wants to know, he wants to have women around him who acknowledge him as a ruler, as a provider, as a leader, as a protector, and who pull these things out of him by praising him for when he does them. So a man longs for praises, but what do they get from us instead? Most men walk around with an empty emotional cup because they have women in their lives who don't understand this very great need in them. And so instead of feeding their ego, what they do is continue to hurt and wound them, is to continue to hurt and wound the masculinity in these men. And how do we wound these men? One of the ways we wound them is by scorning them, just showing that man that he is nothing, speaking to him with disrespect. We mock them for their masculine features and their masculine virtues. We shout at them, speaking to a man like he was your 5-year-old boy. That makes a man feel very wounded. Sometimes it is disregarding the things that they do. A man comes home carrying shopping, and instead of praising him and telling him what a good man he is, what a good father he is, what we do is we tell them what they didn't do, pointing out at their failures. Those are some of the ways we continuously wound men. We compare them with other men. And that, I said even when we were talking about acceptance, is something that deeply wounds a man when you compare him with another man. Even when you hold up other men as examples for him, when you're telling him something good, that is very, very painful. And then when we show lack of confidence in him, this man comes with one of the greatest ideas he has had in the year. And what you do, you pour cold water on those ideas. When you show a man you have no confidence in him, it wounds him. One man told me that he doesn't talk to his wife because when someone shows you that continuously what you're saying is nonsense, you have no business talking to them. So when we fail to show confidence in the ideas they bring up, then it wounds a man very severely. How do most men react when we wound their pride, when we fail to show this admiration towards them? Most men become harsh. They become harsh towards you. They can resort to violence. They can decide to wound you physically because you're wounding them emotionally. They can be filled with very deep resentment. In the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 6 and verse 23, the Bible tells us about Michal, who was David's first wife. He comes carrying the greatest achievement as the king of Israel. And Michal meets David at the door and mocks him and scorns him and is criticizing him. And so what does David say? David tells him, I will become even more undignified than this. But that is not where it stops. The Bible continues in verse 23 and tells us that Michal died without ever having a child. Now, most people have interpreted this scripture differently. Some people have said that God struck Michal with barrenness. But that is not what the Bible says. It simply says that she died without having a child, which could also mean David had other options. He had King Abigail in his life. David might have decided, I will never touch you again. And I have spoken in my counseling sessions with ladies who have had men in their lives who don't touch them. By touching them, I mean who just have no regard for intimacy, who have no desire to be intimate with them. One such case I dealt with, I went to this man's house because he is a person that we have a relationship with. And I asked him, the wife was concerned because this man was not performing. And the wife was concerned and said, this man, he hasn't touched me for the last 2 years. And I asked this, I thought it was something to be concerned about. So we went, and when I talked to this man, I told him, you know, it is okay to seek help where. And this man assured me, to cut a long story short, there was nothing wrong with him. But he said something that I have never forgotten, that every time I'm about to touch this woman, I feel like I'm about to sleep with my enemy. That is how much, when we wound a man's ego, he can resent us. A man can resent you to a point that you can walk around naked and he will never even look at you. He will never desire you sexually. Because when you wound a man's ego, it makes him resentful towards you. Another thing is that he can erect a wall of silence to protect him from the pain that you're causing him. And he just decides, I will never talk to you again. Some men turn to addictions, drugs, alcohol, because being rejected, being disrespected by a woman that you love is so painful. Some men resort to seeking solace in drugs, in alcohol, and in other things. This is the most powerful secret as a woman you can possess. You know, but I also warn, use this secret responsibly. It has an effect that if you start praising the men around you, it could draw any man to you. And sometimes we don't want that kind of attention, especially those of us who are married. Praise and admiration, part of the power that it possesses is that it draws the goodness out of the men. Men will melt, even those ones who seem very harsh. When you just praise him, tell him, hey, you're looking very smart, he will melt. His hardness becomes a mellowness. And that is the power of praise. Another power that praise and admiration has on men is that it grows the confidence and self-esteem of men. Just do it on your son, do it on your husband, on your brothers, and see these men beginning to grow in self-confidence, in self-esteem. Another thing that it does, it is a boost of energy for them. Just tell a 5-year-old that he's strong when he lifts something small, and see how he glows up and tells you, I can lift even this other one, you know. And it is motivation for a man to do bigger and better things. Praise and admiration is what a man wants as a reward from a woman. So when a man does these things in the home, sometimes you will hear a man complaining and saying, "You don't even see what I do. What is this man talking about?" He is saying that you don't acknowledge the things that I do. You don't tell them to me. Most men understand praise and admiration as lessons on being man, on being men. It tells them whether they are being men. Some men could have been brought up by single parents, so they have no idea what being a man is all about. But when he brings that shopping home and you tell him what a good husband he is, then you're telling him this is what good men are like. And it acts as motivation for that man to become a bigger, a better man, and to achieve more. Praise and admiration is the motivation for a man to achieve even bigger things. Men don't do things just to acquire wealth. What they are looking is for is praises, and especially from the women who mean most to them. Admiration makes a man feel manly, which is the most beautiful feeling that a man can get. Just feeling that he is a man is what men regard as the best feeling that they can ever have. Men look for praises. Sometimes, they go fishing for praises. That a man can say something negative about himself and say, I'm such a stupid man. How could I miss out on that? What he's looking for is not a cheerleader to tell him, hey, and when I tell you you're stupid, you think I'm insulting you. He's not looking for you to agree with him. That man is fishing for praises. He's looking out for you to tell him the opposite of what he's feeling about himself. Sometimes men fish for praises by telling us things that they have achieved through the day. Hey, I did this great thing. And what he's looking for is the praises that will come from that woman whom he's telling these things to. Sometimes men fish for praises by doing things in front of us so that we can acknowledge them. But we miss out on these opportunities to grow these men into bigger and better men, because that is what praise and admiration does for a man. Now, this need is at its highest. It is at its peak during teenage and during midlife. Why at this stage? During teenage, a man is growing up and trying to discover what being a man is about. So praise and admiration for our teenagers is very important in growing their confidence. It is very important in growing the self-esteem of our boys and causing them to becoming more ambitious. Praise and admiration is very important to the men in their midlife. At this time, their hairlines are going backwards. They are losing their hair. They are losing their six-pack. And now most of them are growing apart. Their looks are changing. And the man is wondering, am I still as attractive as I was as a young man? Am I still as strong and energetic, as admirable as I was as a young man? And so these two areas in a man's life, during these 2 seasons in a man's life, praise and admiration is at its peak in terms of importance. So if you have a man who is a teenager, if you have a man who is in his midlife, this secret will be especially of great importance if you apply it. Behind every successful man, there is a woman, not a woman who's pushing him, not a woman who is nagging him and criticizing him to become better, but a woman who is praising and admiring and acknowledging the greatness, the better man out of him. Behind every successful man, there is a woman, not a woman who's pushing him, not a woman who is nagging him and criticizing him to become better, but a woman who is praising and admiring and acknowledging the greatness, the better man out of him. Now, I'll give you some few tips on how to apply praise and admiration in the men around you, in your sons, in your brothers, in your husbands. And this, I'm looking forward to hearing what testimonies are going to come out of. One of the ways is by believing in the better sides of this man. The virtues, what do you think of that man in your life? Do you think he's handsome? Do you think he is hardworking? I've had women telling us about, oh, my husband is so hardworking. My brother is so handsome. But have you told him those things? It has to be, you have to be honest when you praise and admire, because people can tell the difference between flattery and true admiration and praises. The other thing is refuse to take for granted the things that these men do in your life. Ask yourself, this thing that this man has done, he's brought shopping home. What of the woman who does not have that man who brought shopping? She would be there fishing for it herself, working hard on her own. So refuse to take for granted anything, big or small, that is done for you by a man. Look out for those opportunities to just pour those praises. Remember, it is food for a man's soul. So be deliberate and intentional about it. When I know that this thing I am doing it with a projected result in mind, then I will do it more intentionally, more deliberately. Remember, it is food for his soul. He needs it to excel. He needs it to live. It is a need. You know, needs are things that you cannot do without. So if I acknowledge that it is a need for me to praise and admire my brother, my husband, then I will be more intentional and deliberate about it. I will not take for granted anything these people do. I will pour praises wherever something is done for me. Call him and refer to him by what that person dreams and aspires to become. Does he aspire one day to become the governor of Nairobi County or Turkana? Then refer to him jokingly, even sometimes excitedly, as Governor so-and-so, Engineer so-and-so, Daktari, Reverend, Bishop. What does that man aspire to be? Call that greatness out of him, and it will really mean a lot to him. It will grow his confidence. Maybe we're asking ourselves then, what are the things that we need to admire in this man? What should I point out? What should I praise about him? There are things that particularly mean a lot to a man, and one of those things is his body, that you praise the body that he has. Is he strong? When he lifts something for you, tell him how strong you think he is. Is he handsome? Is he athletic? Is he tall? Talk about his body. Another thing is his looks. What do you think about him when he dresses up? Is he smart? Does he look admirable? Talk about that. Talk about his intelligence, driving skills, his gardening skills, his decision making. All of these things are things that are particularly very important. His sex drive, for those of us who are married, those are things that are very important to a man's masculinity. So when you praise those things, they actually mean a lot to him. Other things could actually even be his voice, his beards. When he goes for that shave, when he comes back, do you tell him how handsome that shave has made him look? His advancement in career, that when he's late at work, when he's putting so much effort in his work, instead of complaining of how late he's coming, you're telling him how much you admire the hard worker that he is. So these are just some of the things that we need to applaud our men for, admire them for, praise them for. Do it daily. We said it is food. You don't eat food unless you're fasting. You don't eat food today and eat it in another week. So be intentional about it. Tell him that good thing about him in the morning and give him that ego boost. Let him walk out knowing that someone thinks I'm handsome. It doesn't matter what the world thinks. I'm a handsome man in the eyes of the most desirable woman in my life. It is a wonderful feeling for a man to have a woman who sincerely admires and praises him. I want to leave us with this quote, that a man's greatest pride and pleasure is when his masculinity is admired and affirmed by a woman. His greatest pain is when his masculinity is belittled by a woman. So be that woman. Be that woman who admires that man, grows him, and makes him a better man in his life. As usual, I leave you with these application points. Application point number 1 is I want you to look today at something to admire in that man in your life. So the assignment begins today. What are the things that you believe about him? Do you believe he's a handsome man? I want you to tell him today that he is a handsome man, and look for creative ways of doing it. One lady particularly impressed me because she took a text and sent to her husband and told him, "Hi, just checking on you because Handsome people sometimes get stolen. Get creative about it. Tell him a virtue today, just one, about himself. And throughout the week and throughout maybe the month, look daily for something that you believe in him as a virtue, as a good trait in him, as a good behavior in him, and point it out. Number 2 of the application points is I want you to look back at a past achievement, maybe which you missed out on, or a future plan that he has, and get that man to talk to you about it. Instead of criticizing him, tell him how intelligent he is for having had that achievement or thought about it. Listen intently and look out for places where you can praise, throw a praise or an admiration inside of that. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Looking forward to hearing the testimonies as you leave that comment. Share this with your friends. Like and continue to subscribe as we transform this society, as we transform lives, one woman, one family at a time.